This is Noah Gray, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs, and you are listening to the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast.
And welcome into episode 40 of the Best Bell Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Bradley Stalder, and tonight I'll be reviewing the Cincinnati Bengals team projections that I have done. I'll be posting these projections on the website, bestbellfantasy.com. When I'm completed with all the projections, I'll find a way, make sure that you can take a look at them. I want you to be able to see them so that you can see what I see, and then I'll also add some rankings and maybe add some notes as well based on those projections. At any rate, I'm going to keep this brief. We'll begin with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was coming off of a devastating, catastrophic knee injury last season. We weren't sure if he was going to start week one, and then things were trending the right way. He ended up showing a lot of progress, and obviously the Cincinnati Bengals had their best season in a very long time. In fact, there weren't any text messages sent about the Cincinnati Bengals being in the playoffs ever until the 2021 season. So Joe Burrow and the smoking hot Cincinnati Bengals look to repeat their success this year and make it all the way to the Super Bowl yet again. Now, Burrow was very accurate last season, approaching a 70% completion percentage, but I do expect that to go down just a little bit. So I projected it instead a 68% completion percentage. He's very accurate. He knows where his players are supposed to be. And now, year two, removed from the terrible knee injury, and he's got the chemistry with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. All those things can take the next step. And that's what I expect this year. I project Joe Burrow 4,969 passing yards, 32 touchdowns, 13 picks. I project 47 rush attempts and only 3 yards a carry. That's a little bit higher than last year, the rush attempts. I project about 11% of the rush share, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 160 rushing yards. So that totals 335 fantasy points for the quarterback. Last year, 335 would have been quarterback 5, only behind Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes. If Joe Burrow does scramble or run for some more touchdowns, we could see him getting into that quarterback 2, quarterback 3 range. But for right now, the ceiling for Joe Burrow is about quarterback 4 or 5. Last season, he played 16 games. He finished as quarterback 8. If he would have played all 17, probably would have been closer to the quarterback 4 or 5. So I do think that on a points per game basis, he's still pretty close to where he was last year based on what we saw from Joe Burrow. Now, from the running back position, it's going to be Joe Mixon. He's going to be leading the team. Joe Mixon's median rush share last season was about 70 to 73% of the rushes. So I projected that for 17 games. Now, 17 games, I don't think Joe Mixon is going to play all 17 games, but he did play 16 last season and had 292 attempts. So in all 17 games, if he plays that, that's 316 attempts, 4 yards a carry, almost 1,300 rushing yards. He does not convert a lot of the touchdowns. He's a 3% career touchdown rate. So that does lead to 9 touchdowns on 316 rush attempts. But I feel like that's ceiling, like absolute ceiling for Joe Mixon. 8% target share. That was his median target share last season, 52 targets. And Joe Mixon had 48 in 16 games last season. So not out of the range of possibility, but it feels like these median projections are actually going to be closer to the ceiling projections for Joe Mixon. I'll talk about that here in a little bit. His catch percentage, 81%, so 42 receptions, 6 yards per target, 305 receiving yards, just under 2 receiving touchdowns I project for the year. So Mixon last season had 16 total touchdowns. I only project him for about 11 or 12 this season in 2022. So 248 half PPR points. 248 would put him at the running back 5 last season, and that's if everything goes right. Right now, Joe Mixon is going at the start of the second round, like the 204-ish. Are you okay getting a player in the beginning of the second round who's ceiling, like he can't access that running back 1 overall? Are you okay with that? And that's a question that I'm struggling with myself, because I see a huge floor for Joe Mixon, but also he's had an injury history. You can't count last season. He played very well. He stayed healthy. The offensive line should be improved, so maybe we increase that yards per carry a little bit because of improved efficiency. It's going to be hard for me to see him, though, get 13 rushing touchdowns, 4 more than his career rushing touchdown average would project. So I think that this is still a fair assessment. Running back 5, probably closer to running back 7. But if you think about who's going off the board before, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler, Najee Harris is going off before Joe Mixon, right? Sometimes Aaron Jones is going off before Joe Mixon. Derrick Henry is going, Dalvin Cook. I've just listed a bunch, like 5, 6, 7 players. I think Joe Mixon is appropriately priced, but we could see a shift in his third down work is what I'm hearing, some rumblings. And that's why Chris Evans is the other running back in this projection that I have more confidence in. I have Chris Evans projected at 6.2 rush share, almost 30 rushes, 4.5 yards per carry, a rushing touchdown, but 6% of the targets, and that might even go up. So we're looking at 35 plus receptions, 2 or more per game, at least 1, if not 2 receiving touchdowns. And if Joe Mixon goes down, Chris Evans has the agility and the capability to catch passes for Joe Burrow, where we could see some spike weeks out of Chris Evans if Joe Mixon goes down. I'm not big on Samaje Perine as just a between the tackles grinder. I don't think that he's going to be a valuable piece. I think that it's going to be clearly Chris Evans. Travion Williams is an afterthought. So if you want to take a stab at a running back, the better pass catching running back is Chris Evans. The better pass blocking third down back is probably going to be Chris Evans. So you should be in on drafting Chris Evans as one of your players in rounds 18, 19, 20, wherever he's landing near the end of your fantasy drafts. Now to get to the fun part, the wide receivers. Jamar Chase, I have projected at a 23% target share, so just a little bit higher, 150 total targets, 91 receptions, 61% catch rate, 1,500 receiving yards. Last season, there were 3 players to get 1,500 receiving yards, and that was Cooper Kupp with 1947, Justin Jefferson with 1616, Devontae Adams with 1553, Jamar Chase 1455. I think that it increases just a little bit. And Jamar Chase had 13 receiving touchdowns. I project him for just under 12. But it's the targets and receptions that go up for Chase compared to last year. 150 targets is my projection. He only had 128 last year in 17 games, and I project 91 receptions instead of 81 from last year. And last season, Jamar Chase had 264 fantasy points in half PPR. That was wide receiver 5. I project 266.4. So we're talking still in that upper echelon of wide receivers. And he's obviously going as wide receiver 3 behind Cooper Kupp and Justin Jefferson. And if you want some upside plays, Jamar Chase has within the range of outcomes to be the wide receiver 1 overall. So Draft him with that type of confidence. And if you're in a keeper league, you just got a huge deal, especially because a lot of keeper leagues drafted. If your keeper league started up last year and you got Jamar Chase in the 8th round, 7th round, 9th round, wherever, Jamar Chase is he's a game changer for sure. And I project an increase in target share and reception. So looking forward to seeing what kind of magic Jamar Chase can continue to show here in 2022. T. Higgins, also one of the top wide receivers. I project T. Higgins at 137 targets, 21% share, 87 receptions, 1,162 receiving yards, just under 7 touchdowns. And that puts him at exactly 200 fantasy points. That would have been wide receiver 15 last season. T. Higgins is going off the board around the wide receiver 12, but I think that's like fine. Like looking at what happened last year, like there were 5 players who scored between 204 and 208 fantasy points. And all you need is a couple more spike weeks out of T. Higgins, and you could see an ascension into that top 7, top 8. And if you have 2 wide receivers in the top 8, I mean, we saw that with Tampa Bay last season. We saw Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin all be top 7 in fantasy points per game. And T. Higgins and Jamar Chase very well could mimic that elite performance. The third wide receiver is Tyler Boyd, and sometimes he's forgotten about, but he does have some spike week potential. My projection for Boyd, 17% target share, 78 receptions, 113 targets, about 4 touchdowns, 142 fantasy points. That does put him at what would have been wide receiver 36 last season and a half point, assuming, of course, playing all 17 games, but that's what a lot of those players did. So I think that Tyler Boyd is a back end wide receiver 3 with handcuff mid wide receiver 2 potential if either T. Higgins or Jamar Chase goes down. He's one of those rare wide receiver handcuffs where we've seen 1,000-yard seasons from Tyler Boyd before, and that was just with Andy Dalton. So yeah, I know he's a little bit older, but Tyler Boyd still has it, and I think that Tyler Boyd is sometimes viewed as an underrated asset here in fantasy football. The only other meaningful piece in this Cincinnati offense, I think, is going to be Hayden Hurst. The only other tight ends are Thaddeus Moss and Drew Sample that are of note. And Drew Sample's not much of a pass catcher. He's a pass block, or he's a blocker. And Thaddeus Moss is an homage to his father. Like, he was an undrafted free agent. Hayden Hurst, first round pedigree out of Baltimore. Hayden Hurst now coming over from Atlanta. I project Hayden Hurst at a 12% share, 53 receptions, 78 targets, about 4.5 touchdowns, so between 4 and 5, 105 half PPR fantasy points. That would have put Hayden Hurst at about tight end 19, which is where CJ Uzomah, the former Cincinnati Bengals tight end, finished last season. Uzomah finished with 103.8 fantasy points, and I project Hurst at about 105. But we did see Uzomah have some spike weeks, and I think that that's what Hayden Hurst is going to bring. Maybe a little higher floor, but a higher ceiling as well. Uzomah disappeared in some games. So maybe Hurst doesn't have exactly like the 25 fantasy point weeks in him, but I think a more comfortable 7, 8 fantasy points per game and half point, that's not going to be too crazy. So if you want a cheap option, a cheap part of the Cincinnati offense, it's probably going to be Hayden Hurst. Taking a step back, you want all of the major pieces of this Cincinnati offense. They're going to be Pass heavy. I have the projected pass rate to be at about 60%. So 648 passes to 432 rushes. I have 63.5 plays per game. I think that that's going to be, it's faster than most of the other teams, almost 1,100 plays on the season. So there's a lot to like about the Cincinnati offense. And going into 2022, you could see a few of them having spike seasons. So, ultimately, draft Joe Burrow, draft Chris Evans, draft Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Hayden Hurst late. All right. Those are my takeaways for the Cincinnati offense. And they've got a tough schedule, like zooming out, because they made it to the Super Bowl. They have one of the toughest schedules now here in 2022. So you could see the offense being pushed by other elite offenses. Depending upon the Deshaun Watson situation for Cleveland may be more competitive than what we're initially projecting for. So this Cincinnati offense could be even higher than last year, believe it or not. So those are some takeaways. Appreciate all of you dropping in, popping in, viewing, saying hi. Thanks, everyone. And if you haven't subscribed to the Best Bell YouTube channel, make sure you click the red subscribe button. Make sure you click follow and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to the podcast. Check out bestbellfantasy.com. I'll be updating projections, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, when I finish all of them. Right now, I've gotten through Green Bay, and then I'll have Houston, Indy, Jacksonville, Kansas City, Vegas. I'm about halfway through the projections right now. And then once it's done, I'll get it posted to the website, and you can listen and watch and view these projections reviews as I go through them. And you can also see the document updated live for your favorite teams, or to see the rankings based on the median projections that I have. So, all right. Great. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Appreciate you stopping by. And till next time, good luck in the best ball streets.